Hi, friends and family, and my Truthatude Tribe. I hope you're enjoying your Sunday evening. I am coming to you because I haven't been on live for a while, and I'm coming to you with a humble and heavy heart. Everything that has been going on this past week and a half, almost 2 weeks, has just been heavy on my heart, and I wanted to pop on and talk to my circle and my community and share some things that I have learned, that I'm hoping to learn, and to continue the conversation that is so uncomfortable right now and painful. I did attend a protest yesterday for Black Lives Matter, and I am just so happy to say that it was beautiful, it was peaceful, and it was passionate. And you know, I didn't know what to expect when I went, and I did not feel this angry tension in the air. There was a lot of passion and sadness, and also just in my experience in Orlando, everybody around me was wearing masks, and everybody was trying to be respectful of distancing. It was really unique to our city, I think, to see just the amount of support that everybody was giving each other. It was really neat to see local restaurants showing up and handing out food and snacks and water. And you know, in downtown Orlando, it was muggy and rainy and just so humid. Every one of us was just, you know, soaking wet. But it was a beautiful moment, and I just was happy to be a part of it and support it. You know, I have an activist's heart, and I know that many of you in my community do as well. To the riots and the looting, I want to speak just my personal opinion, because there's just a lot of stuff floating around the internet about all of that, and I encourage you to look at it from a different lens. You can understand the psychology behind the riots and the looting without necessarily condoning it. I think that we get stuck in this or that conversation, and it's more than that. You can certainly understand the psychology behind something without condoning it, and that's kind of where I sit as far as the rioting and the looting. I understand why it happens, and you know, that's something that got people's attention, and in the United States we value things, and in order to get attention, things get broken. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong or that I condone it or whatever. I'm just saying that I can understand the psychology behind it, and I'm offering that maybe you understand a little bit too, without necessarily saying it's okay. That's where I sit. I've heard a lot of crazy theories floating around. I've seen a lot of stuff floating around on the internet about, you know, this is just another race war agitation. And I really think that that dismisses the experience of so many people who have encountered racism, discrimination, bias, prejudice on any level. It really just dismisses it and doesn't really capture the full experience, to just dismiss this as just another race war agitation. So I encourage you to do your own research and come to your own conclusion on that. There was another crazy theory running around, and actually being propagated by some people that I know, about Antifa and, you know, them hiring or being hired by left-wing elitists to go and riot and loot and whatever. I don't know what kind of truth there is to that. From the research that I've done about Antifa, it's not even an actual organization. There's no leadership, there's no dedicated membership, there's no website, there's not anything that makes it a concrete entity. So I find it curious that people are latching on to that theory, and I just encourage you to do some exploring of your own, and don't just latch on to some idiot idea that's being put out there by a lot of sources on the internet. You know, like I said, I have an activist's heart, and I felt this internal restlessness, like I wasn't doing enough. And I know that that is a common feeling among a lot of people, especially my friends, my family, my Truthatude community, my sisterhood, that they don't know if they're doing quite enough. And I encourage you to explore that there are different forms of activism. You don't necessarily have to be out in the streets with a sign. You can check on your friends. You can have uncomfortable conversations. You can practice self-care. And I think that that's an easily dismissed form of activism, but I would encourage you to explore the idea of fortifying your own self so that you are stronger in your words and your actions and your spirit. And that is what can come from self-care as a form of activism. So I encourage you to just explore these different avenues. If artistic expression feeds your soul and that's how you express your activism, wonderful. Music, whatever it takes, like you don't necessarily have to be marching in the streets to feel like you're doing enough. Just showing up to the conversation is enough. Just exploring ideas is enough. So just think about that. I wanted to also, I took some notes because I just really wanted to put a lot of my thoughts down, because people have just been coming to me with a lot of questions, and I love that so much. I'm just honored. To my friends with good intentions and the people out there with, I think, good hearts that are, you know, retweeting and reposting and sharing things that say all lives matter. I really want you to try to understand what that means to people who are telling you that they are in pain. When I say to you, I am in pain, and your retort to me is, well, we all experience pain, that's hurtful. And that's exactly what's happening when people say, you know, Black Lives Matter, and then people say all lives matter. Well, yeah, that's our hope. You know, we're hoping that all lives eventually do equally matter, but right now we are a collective community saying we don't feel like our lives are valued at the same level as white people. And we are not saying that Black lives matter more than anybody else. We want all lives to matter. That's what this whole thing is about, is just hoping that eventually we can be, you know, seen as equals in the eyes of the law and in the eyes of our hearts and each other. So that's kind of where I sit with that all lives matter. I do think that some people are saying it with good intention and they want to say that everybody matters. But right now, the conversation isn't about you. It's about this community experiencing such deep-rooted pain. And it weighs so heavy on my heart. And it's been heartbreaking for me, but I did think that it was important for me to speak because I do have this, you know, public space, and I always view myself as a leader. And to my friends who also have good intentions and they want to take the stance of being colorblind, or, you know, I've heard it a lot that I don't see color. I think what you're saying is a nice idea, but it's missing the point. I don't want you to not see my color. We're not asking you to be colorblind. I want you to see my color. I want you to see my brown skin. I want you to see the beautiful black skin of my friends. I want you to acknowledge the struggles of my past and the current struggles that we're facing as a community of color. I want you to embrace my culture and love it and enjoy its beauty and recognize the diversity that we're bringing to the table. I don't want you to be colorblind. I want you to see my color, because my color is a huge part of who I am, and I can't speak for everybody, but this is just all of my perspective. We're not asking you to be colorblind. We want you to see our beauty and our color and our culture and to honor it, because that's what we deserve. Everybody deserves to be honored. I think it's it's really just easy to fall into this binary way of thinking, and it's really not an either or conversation. It's not a this or that, and we really have to get away from this taking sides, because this shit is mad complicated with many nuances and years and years and years of history, and we're just digging at the surface right now. This goes way back and way deep, and it's just super complicated, and I think it's easy to choose a side, but there's all sides, and we're not gonna get it right. I mean, shit, if this was easy, we would figure this out a million years ago, but we're still dealing with the same thing. I just want you to remember when you're posting stuff, and I'm trying to remember too, that, you know, we all see things through our unique lens, and that comes from our color, our culture, our experiences, where we grew up. And, you know, I'm Mexican and I'm Native American, and I've experienced racism my whole life. But I recognize my privilege as a light-skinned Latina. I can pass for white. And to top it off, I have a hella white name, Lindsay, right? And I have to recognize that because I can pass, I can get into places that my own brothers can't. Or, you know, and I have to be able to use that voice and that passable card for the better. You know, I grew up in the hood with a drug addict mom, and that colors my lens on how I see things. I then moved to a super conservative, mostly white, small town, and that colored my perspective. You know, I was the only brown kid in so many of my classes, and, you know, countless times I was asked to represent the entire Mexican population, and I was asked, you know, what do Mexicans think about this? What do Native Americans think about this? I don't know, but I can't even tell you. I mean, college professors asked me my opinion on, you know, what Hispanics think about this or how we feel about that, and, you know, it's frustrating, but I don't represent my whole culture. I represent myself, but, you know, that's just one of the frustrations that we're always being asked to do. I just want to say that that is all just a part of my lens, and if you are willing to recognize how your experiences and your culture affect the lens through which you see things, I think it will help us reach a deeper level of understanding and compassion with each other. I think we just all have to be willing to kind of open that lens and see things with a wider view. You know, open your heart, ask questions. It's okay to ask questions. You know, come to the conversation with curiosity and humility, and be an active listener, which I think is something that is so lacking in everybody. I'm not perfect. I have a hard time listening sometimes, and really listening, and I think that that's, you know, something that's plaguing our country right now, is just this inability to really listen, especially to people who are telling you that we're in pain. And, you know, speaking of being Latina, I've seen a lot of this on my feed about, you know, well, where were they, you know, protesting, like, where were they when we were trying to protest ICE, and how come our issues don't matter right now? And, you know, there's a lot of this conversation about, well, what about us? And to that I say, our issues are important. In the Latino community, we have experienced extreme oppression, but this is not the oppression Olympics, okay? We are not, you know, trying to engage in this comparative suffering. Well, we have it bad too, and we have it worse than you, or, you know, whatever. Right now, we're focusing on our Black brothers and sisters who are in pain, and a community that needs our help and our solidarity. And we, as Latinos, have to recognize that within our own community, we have a lot of work to do. You know, the disparities and the racism that occurs within our own community against each other and against the Black community is something we need to work on as well. So for right now, as a Latina, I am taking a seat and I am supporting my Black brothers and my Black sisters in pain. That's the stance I'm taking. I know my issues are important. I know the Latina issues are important. The women's issues are important. The LGBTQ issues are important. But right now, we need to collectively focus and rally behind our brothers and sisters who are in pain. It is so painful for me. I don't even watch these videos because I know what the end result is. I know that another person of color is gonna lose their life for some dumb shit. And I'm not saying that these other issues are not important, they are. But our Black brothers, our Black sisters are hurting. And it breaks my heart. They just can't even walk out their door without potentially not coming home. And it hurts. And I want to talk about white privilege because I think that's something that is just so misconstrued. And white people take up their defenses, you know, whenever white privilege is brought up. And I even heard somebody say that white privilege isn't even a real thing. It's just this made up term. And when we talk about white privilege, we're not saying that your life is easy. We're not saying that you haven't endured hardships or that you haven't faced some kind of bias or prejudice or discrimination. What we're saying is that your privilege is that you haven't endured these hardships or this systematic oppression simply because you are white. You don't have to live by an additional set of rules because you are white. White privilege is the fact that this system was built around whites as the standard, and everyone else is the powerless other. We are always the other, and we are constantly reminded in culture, in the media, in the laws and legislation that we are the other. Our otherness is super apparent all the time. I said this to my colleague the other day about having to show up to work after everything that was going on, about having to still show up, and that, you know, my color doesn't turn off from 9 to 5. Like, I still carry this with me. And there was a beautiful article on LinkedIn that this woman was talking about her experience of all of this world crumbling around her, and yet she's still expected to be on that conference call Monday morning and have that report, you know, due. And it's like, this is something we battle with. Our whole world is crumbling outside, and we're still expected to show up. We're expected to turn off our color when it's convenient, but allow them to use it as their diversity. So that's a struggle. That is a systematic error. And something I hear a lot too is, hold on, that I want to touch on, and it really irritates me, is this notion of reverse racism. Now, I do not say that white people cannot experience discrimination or bias, but what's different between that and racism is that racism is a systematic power structure. So even if you you experience prejudice or discrimination of some kind or bias, it doesn't systematically take away your power, because you are still the standard to which everything else is measured and, is set up against. You still have your power as a white person living within the system that was designed for you and around you. So there's no such thing as reverse racism, because no matter how much somebody rails against you in a discriminating way, they're not taking away your power of position in this society. So, it's really complicated, and I'm not an expert on it, but that's just my understanding, and I'm hoping to convey that understanding to you about this idea of reverse racism. It's not a real thing. And, I wanted to talk about, too, about how everybody says that this is a law of, the land of laws, and we have laws for a reason, and if they just comply and they follow the law and they're not doing anything wrong or, committing crimes, if you're not doing anything wrong, then you don't have a problem. Well, that should be true, but we live by an additional set of rules in addition to the laws that are set. And, when I was a kid, being Mexican, when I was a kid, we were all taught to look both ways before you cross the street. Don't talk to strangers, be nice to other people. But as a Mexican, I was also taught that I had to be cleaner in my person, in my property, and in my conduct than anybody else, so that I wasn't called a dirty Mexican. My house had to be cleaner, my body had to be cleaner, I had to speak English perfectly without an accent. I had to be more articulate than anybody else. And I remember always being told to make sure, like when you go shopping, to have a receipt handy so that if they search you, you can prove that you bought something. And it's these little rules. And, we have a lot in common with the Black community who has to, as parents, teach their kids an additional set of rules, so that when they leave the house, they come home safely and they don't die, so that they can just come home. I was talking to a friend of mine when I was asking him, what were the additional rules that you grew up with as a Black man and as a young Black man? And one of the things he talked about was he always had to smile and be approachable so that people weren't afraid of him. And to always have his hands and his face visible everywhere he went. And I thought that was really interesting. And there were a lot of rules that we shared in common, like don't go anywhere without your ID. And I don't know if anybody else thinks about that, but I was stopped for a traffic violation. I didn't even have a violation, but I was stopped and I was detained until I could prove that I was a citizen. I was born in Colorado. This happened in Colorado. So it's just interesting. So I encourage you to just do your own research. I learned something in debate. I was in debate when I was in high school, and a dear friend of mine, she asked me, she was like, what do I do? How do I learn? What media sources should I pay attention to? Where should I go for information? And, something that I learned in debate in high school was to look at both sides of the argument. Make sure that you research all the arguments and the information on the other side of what you believe in and formulate your own understanding. So I look at all the news channels. I read a lot of different, journals and academic publications. I look at what, my friends who don't necessarily share my beliefs, I look at what they're seeing because I want to know what they're learning. What are they digesting? What is the information that's being put out on this side that's causing this division? So that's what I encourage you to do, is to look at both sides and find your own understanding. I just think that's really important because a lot of times, especially on social media and especially in the world that we live in, we are really just too quick to repost or share something that already aligns with our narrative or our current belief. I do this too. I'm guilty. And we're not doing this before we do our own research and find out, is this true? Does this really make sense for me? It's really easy to throw around statistics. Anybody can find numbers to align with your agenda. Anybody can. So I just encourage you to do your own research, look at both sides thoroughly. Know what that counter argument is, because that's what makes your cause stronger, and you can really define where you sit on an issue. Learn from both sides. And then you can also see the radical shit that is being put out on both sides, that when you compare them all together, you can see how ridiculous some of the stuff that they're saying is, and you can formulate your own understanding. And I just think that if people took that step to go a little bit further and really researched, and I don't mean just watching the news. Look at academic journals, look at what, academic publications are coming out, talk to other friends, look at, the batshit crazy stuff on the other side of the argument and see what they're really saying so that you can form a strong stance on your own. There's just a lot to unpack here. And, I'll tell you some things that I've learned in this past week, because I've seen a lot of information going around, and I watched the Candice Owens video, and I thought that was a really interesting perspective. I saw a lot of my friends sharing that video, and I'm not really sure what their intentions are with sharing that. What I did get from that video is that she has her own slant and she has her own opinion. I did sense that there was a lot of demonizing of the victim, which happens a lot in rape cases. I'm not saying that she is the only one doing that. I think that there's a lot of that. People are wanting to say about George Floyd specifically that, there are a lot of people on one side trying to make him a martyr. There are a lot of people on the other side trying to, bash his reputation and basically almost justify his death because he was a criminal. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of criminalizing and demonizing the victims in a lot of these situations. And before anybody jumps on the bandwagon of doing that, I think it's important to ask yourself, okay, let's say Joe Schmo did something wrong. Did he deserve to lose his life because of it? That's the central issue. Nobody's saying that, everybody is perfect and that they're, blameless, but what we are saying is that the punishment should fit the crime and everybody should get due process and equal justice. That's what we're saying. And by demonizing the victim, like I said, is done in so many rape cases, or gaslighting people, talking about this race war, doesn't exist, or you're imagining this problem, you're making it worse than it is, or why are you dredging up old wounds? It's not helping the conversation move forward. So I ask you, before you post something or, reshare something, really do the research behind it and come to an educated conclusion for yourself. And please call me out on it if I do it. So one of the things that I've been following is, they are calling for police reform. And I've heard this defund the police. And this is an area that I want to learn. I don't know a lot about this. I'm not sure exactly what that means to defund the police. I'm not sure what exactly is being asked for specifically or what that will look like. So I will continue to listen, I will continue to research, and I will continue to learn. And I encourage you to do the same. That is something I'm not knowledgeable about yet. But I am seeing a lot of it go around. So I'm going to continue to have a curious heart and learn. And I just encourage you to do the same thing. What I do know is that for me personally, I support good cops who protect and serve the people and who speak out against police misconduct and brutality. And I do hope that they are there for me if I need them. I do not believe that the police should be militarized or militant or, brutal. I do not believe that. I do not believe that they should have the same weaponry. I do not believe that they should use the same amount of force or tactics as the military. So that is my personal belief. I support and I love the police officers that I know and that are doing their job to honor that badge. And this shit is mad complicated. And I think that there are more people out there who kind of support all the things than there are that are on the far end of the spectrum. Something that I learned, so I speaking of the military, I talked to a former partner of mine who was in the military, and he was a weapons specialist. And I thought it was really important to bring forth what I learned about the weapons as he explained it to me. Something that was really concerning of note is that they are using tear gas heavily on the protesters in all states, in all areas. I did not know that tear gas is an abortifacient, which makes me really scared for my best friend who is expecting a baby. I did not know that just breathing that in could terminate a pregnancy, and it really scares me, and it really bothers me to see videos, especially one in my hometown, Denver, where they're shooting these things and there's gas at a car with a pregnant woman inside. That just breaks my heart that they could potentially put her unborn child at risk for this. So that's something to unpack there. And you know, I think it's a good step in the right direction, asking for anti-bias training. I think that's a great start. But where I continue to have questions, and I'm honestly just coming to my community with questions so that I can learn, you know, what kind of training is there for de-escalation of situations? Because I find it really, really tough to believe and take to my heart that these police officers don't have the ability to de-escalate a situation without using a weapon. I find that really hard to believe, and so I just wonder, like, what kind of training do they receive for that? What kind of, you know, mental health screening do they go through, if any? I really don't know the answer to that question. What kind of training do they get as far as how to restrain somebody without injury or with minor injury? And when is it okay to use that restraint? And then when are they supposed to use their weapon, and, you know, to what extent, and how can they lawfully use force if necessary without major injury or death to the person? These are genuine questions that I have, and I think that the anti-bias training is a wonderful place to start, but I do think that, you know, there needs to be some kind of policy change or reinforcement of a policy, if it exists, about de-escalation, when to use, you know, restraint, and how, when and how to use force without, you know, major injury or death, and then when it's appropriate to use your weapon. Because I just, you know, I've seen mental health professionals restrain an individual with a weapon without anybody really getting hurt. I've seen nurses and doctors have to do this. I've seen, you know, drug counselors have to do this. So I just really, if we have the best of the best training and police force available, like, why is this an issue? So these are genuine questions that I have that came up in my mind that I wanted to pose to my community. You know, and to that I would want to reiterate, you know, we are a community in pain, and it's time to have real conversations. You know, I often assume the responsibility to educate my white friends and other white people on my experience, and I'm really often, I'm happy to do that, but it's not my duty as a brown girl, and I get tired. It's exhausting to have to constantly be the educator, you know, and to try to take down ignorance as one person. And I know that people in my brown community and my black community, they feel the same way. We're tired. You know, we don't take that responsibility lightly, and it shouldn't even be our responsibility to educate, but we do. And it's exhausting. And, you know, to my white friends that are throwing their hands up in the air and wanting to say, like, I care, but I just don't know what to do or what to say, and I feel like I have to walk on eggshells. It's really okay to just come to the conversation humbly and say, I care, but I don't know what to do or what to say. That's wonderful. That's a wonderful place to start. It's okay to just come to the conversation and say, I don't understand. I don't understand. You know, I think if everybody just put their egos away for a little bit and just said, hey, I don't understand what this means. Why is it not okay to say this? Or, you know, I'm truly asking from a humble place, like, help me understand. we need to have more conversations like that. Why are you hurting? Why is this offensive? Can you help me understand? You know, I don't want people to feel like they have to walk on eggshells, but at the same time, I do think that people should be sensitive to each other. So I think if just more people came to the conversation willing to be vulnerable and just say, hey, I don't get it, that's really okay. You know, that's okay for me. And, you know, I've had to release some relationships that were important to me because of that lack of understanding or that lack of willingness, you know, and I think that more people are experiencing that. Right now, there are families who are torn, you know, and they're going through pain because they have people in their family that are on opposite ends of the issue, and that's painful and it's uncomfortable, and this isn't an easy conversation to have. And, you know, I say that now is the time for courage and conviction. It's not a matter of opinion. It's not if you like Pepsi or Coke. People are dying and they're being denied their rights because of the color of their skin. People are dying. Kids are losing their moms and their dads. People are losing their brothers and their sisters and their daughters and their sons and their best friends because of the fucking color of their skin. So this is not, well, I respect your opinion, but I don't feel that way. Like, racism really isn't a matter of opinion. Like, it's wrong. It's wrong. And, you know, I just ask that you don't look to the right and you don't look to the left for answers. You look in your heart. Look to your humanity and what is right in your spirit. And, you know, Black Lives Matter, that's the minimum. That is the bare minimum. Yeah, they should matter. But Black lives, they're beautiful and they're worthy and they deserve, you know, the equal right to pursue life and liberty and happiness. And my wish in saying all of this, my wish for you and my wish for my community and my wish for us is, you know, to come together as a community and support our brothers and our sisters who are in pain. My wish is that my best friend, who is about to bring a beautiful brown mixed baby into this world, that baby has an equal chance and that she can grow up with love and equal treatment. My wish is that my dear friend who has a strong Black son, that she doesn't have to continue to teach him an additional set of rules just so he doesn't die while being Black. You know, my wish is that I don't have to explain why I don't look Mexican or where I'm really from to strangers who think I look ethnic or exotic. My wish is that I don't have to explain to my colleague that a door wedge is not, like, it's not okay to call it a Mexican doorstop. You know, those are my wishes. My wish is that we continue to have more representation of diversity in TV, in music, elected officials, executive offices. My wish is that we can have compassion and give grace to those who accept their mistakes and want to do better. I think it doesn't serve anybody to continue to chastise somebody who said, you know what, I said something wrong or I fucked up, but now I know better and I want to do better. Let's give them some grace. I am just super thankful and honored. I've had a lot of conversations. I've had a lot of friends. I've had a lot of people reach out to me for help, for information, for conversations, and for understanding. And I am not an expert, and I am only a spokesperson for myself and my brand. But I am happy to have honest, open, and even really uncomfortable conversations with you, with anybody. I just want to remind you that even though this shit is mad heavy, it's still okay to find moments of joy and to find beauty and, It's okay to have something to be excited about and to have fun and enjoy your life, because that's ultimately what we are fighting for, is to enjoy our lives and have the equal opportunity to do so. That being said, this is messy, and I am willing to be an open space for you. If you want to have a conversation, email me, call me, private message me, text me, please. The more conversations that we're willing to have, the more messy, uncomfortable conversations we're willing to have, that's what's going to move the needle forward. That's what's going to create change. And so I thought it was important to use my platform to talk to everybody in my community, to really specify where I stand on things, and to ask for your help in understanding the things that I have questions on still. I will continue to create a learning space. I will continue to research and to learn and to listen, and I just offer that you do the same. Come to the conversation with humility, understanding, curiosity, and love, and just, spread that love and joy and beauty, because life is good and people are good, and we have a community in pain and they're asking for our help. So please, let's just band together and help each other and really create this change, because we all want the same thing. We all want to live our lives and experience joy and experience love and be happy. So let's do that. Let's get messy. Let's have really nasty, uncomfortable conversations. Let's get informed and be activists in your heart and in whatever way that means for you. This is me staying true and authentic and vulnerable to my truth, to my truthitude. And I humbly thank you for listening. I love you so much with all my heart. I'm here. I'm here for you. Thank you. I love you. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye for now. Ciao.